works?
Yes, it's working.
Must be dead.
Well, maybe it's on a switch. This is Mrs. Hawkins, and I'm interviewing Mr. Bennett Cerf. Breakfast. That's probably come on tape recorder too. That's all right. Mr. Cerf, you were born in New York, or a born New Yorker, in 1898. Would you like to say anything about that?
Yes, well, I think I'm rather an unusual specimen in New York, and that I'm now a third. All four of my grandparents and both my parents, as well as myself, were born right on the island of Manhattan. My father's family is Alsatian in extraction, and my mother's family is German. Well, my mother's family was named Wise. Now, the background of the family is shrouded in some mystery. I've never bothered investigating very much about my antecedents, except I do know that my father's father, Cerf, was a jeweler, and my mother's father was in the tobacco business. Yes. The Cerf family was always loaded with charm, but not much money. The Wise family didn't have nearly as much charm, but they had a lot more money. And my grandfather, Mr. Nathan Wise, built up in New York a very big tobacco company called the Metropolitan Tobacco Company. And one time, a young man came to him and suggested a partnership, and my conservative grandfather didn't think it was very good. The man's name was Duke, and he now became the great tobacco magnate, but my grandfather thought he was a wild young fellow, which indeed he was. But at that, my grandfather, when he died, had amassed $1 million for himself. And in those days, that was a great deal of money.
A lot more than it is today.
But now the way that money was divided, and this is important in the beginning of my career, was that he had remarried. He had married a very lovely woman some years after his first wife died, and he had 6 children. So when he died, the money was divided in 7 parts. The widow got a good chunk of it, and the 6 children divided the others. Now, I have to tell you a few words about my father, because my mother died the day before I was 16, and I was the only son. So
did you have any sisters?
No, I was the only child.
Only child.
But the important thing to remember is that my father and I were together then from the day before I was 16 until his death. Now, a word about how my father and mother met. In those days, when they were young, it was considered quite the thing for respectable young ladies to take elocution lessons and recite, the boy stood on the burning deck and stuff like that. My father, who was a very handsome, charming, wonderful man, I absolutely adored him, and so did everybody else. Besides being quite a ball player, gave elocution lessons on the side and was a lithographer by profession. In about 1892, my pop got a tryout with the Brooklyn Dodgers, which as a catcher, which of course was something we kidded him about all his life.
Probably very proud of it.
He couldn't hit big league pitching. It was a year after he used to tell us the Dodgers were members of a league called the Players League in those days, and they had just gotten into the National League. It's 1891, I believe, they got it, and the year after it, my pop trained with them. But he had been a semi-pro catcher on weekends. He'd catch, and he got a tryout with the Dodgers. And for the rest of his life, we kidded him by not being able to hit big league pitching. He would always have a resented, and always, no matter how often we'd accuse him of it, he'd always give us an explanation of why he hadn't done it. But anyway, besides learning lithography, which was his business, and which he achieved some success in fact, a few of the labels that my father designed are still used today. One of them is Murad cigarettes, and the other one is Blue Label ketchup. Those two labels are still were designed by my father many years ago. But
Did
When
he have
was
any
young.
schooling? Any?
Well, he went through high school.
Went through high school.
Yes, I couldn't tell you the name, but
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just wondering.
Yes.
Yeah.
My mother went through high school. Girls didn't go to college, you know, to any great extent. Not in the circles that our family moved in, anyway. And but all the girls. She was one of 3 girls and 3 boys. There was 6, as I said, 6 children in the Wise family. The girls all took elocution lessons. And the gentleman who gave my mother elocution lessons was my father. And they fell madly in love, and they ran away together, to the outrage of my grandfather, who looked upon my father as a charming fly-by-night. And these 2 people were gloriously and wondrously happy for their entire lives. So I was born into a very happy family.
Where were you born exactly? Where were you living in New York?
I was born in a house that is now in one of the most run-down sections of New York, 117th Street. And but very early in life, my family moved to an apartment house called the Douglas. But because I went there, I lived there, I went to public school 10, which was 117th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. And this is where my real life began, because in that school I met some of the people who became lifelong friends.
Would you like to say anything more about your mother? Was your mother an attractive woman?
Well, yes, I can talk a little bit about her. First of all, she was the most sensitive woman in the world, very easily hurt. And the only trouble I remember in our family was my mother would always have some fancied slight to complain about when my father came home. And when I grew old enough to join in, we would continually have to reassure her that these people were not trying to insult her, but she was terribly sensitive. And this is important in my story because I've inherited this. And I'm terribly sensitive too. I'm terribly easily hurt. And I put past this on to my oldest son, Chris. Chris and I love each other very much, but we hurt each other because, without meaning to, because we're terribly sensitive. My wife, Phyllis, laughs at us, and it is laughable. We both know we're now smart enough, and things have come to the point where you analyze yourself more carefully than you used to. I know this weakness. My mother didn't. But outside of that, she was a lovely, lovely woman, and she was desperately anxious to have another child. And she'd had several miscarriages and was told that she just wasn't strong enough, but she persisted. And when I was 15, a little girl was born. Only lived about 2 weeks, but also weakened my mother to the point that less than a year later she died. Because I remember the day before I was 16 years old. Well, that was a blow.